Let me be the first person to say that I really don't know what I'm doing. This project is going to be me essentially exploring how little in fact I do know and what links I need to go through in order to learn and be successful in my efforts. The origins of this project can be traced back to over 25 years ago when I first put my hands on a guitar. I started writing what one may call songs shortly thereafter, and thus the urge to create in the realm of music began. Now, as an adult, I've written many songs, and while their quality may be debatable, I am proud of what I've been able to do. There is, however, an itch that I have yet to be able to scratch. I recently came back from vacation in Japan where through sheer luck I happened to meet one of my favorite musicians. We talked about how cool it was that he was able to write music for a video game, and that got me thinking. I've wanted to write music for a purpose other than my own for a really long time. The idea of writing video game music or music for a movie has been a constant wish. Not because I know I'd be good at it, but because the way I'd have to go about it would be so fundamentally different from what I'm used to that it'd at the very least be a good learning experience. It's easy enough to have a desire to want to write video game music, but actually finding an opportunity to do so is a lot harder than it seems. I don't have any friends that are really deep in the video game making process that are ready to do anything with audio. I've thought about all sorts of different ways to go about it. On and on, until I had an aha moment. What if I didn't need to find an opportunity? What if I didn't need to hope for a door to open? What if I could just compose music for a game that's already been released? The last time I started working on something I had no business doing, I knew it would be difficult and take so much time, but I still ended up underestimating how much work it would be. My first thought for this body of work was taking one of my favorite games, Final Fantasy IX, and recomposing the entire soundtrack. It only took one look at the 110-track-long soundtrack for me to realize this certainly was not the way to go. Even if I were able to compose a replacement track every single week, this would be something that would lasted well over 2 years. Not to mention, coming up with new tracks weekly is a goal that's, at the very least, heavily misguided. There's no way that I could commit to such a long period of work. So, I walked backwards and ended up on the original Final Fantasy. With a track list comprised of 20 to 36 songs or musical pieces, depending on which version of the game's soundtrack you look at, I feel that this is a perfect starting point. I'm not a video game historian or anything, but based on this list, Final Fantasy is the first real popular video game that Nobuo Uematsu released all the way back in 1987. I say popular, I really don't have any idea if these games are super popular or not. This is just the only one I recognize. Nobuo Uematsu has been my favorite video game music composer my entire life, and by starting with some of his earliest work, I hope to be able to learn much from what he did from the very beginning. I must admit firstly that I'm going into this with way more knowledge than Mr. Nobuo had. I don't know, and yes, I'll be saying this a lot, what information he was given when he was asked to compose for Final Fantasy, but I doubt it was a complete game. I think he was likely given descriptions of in-game events or desired sounds, but I wasn't there to confirm. Regardless, I have not only a complete game with dialogue and an understanding of the story, but also a spin-off in Final Fantasy Origins Stranger of Paradise that further gives me background in how grim the story actually is. Another benefit that we have today is knowing how iconic some of the themes in FF1 ended up being. Did he know that when he wrote the opening theme, that it would be used in almost every following Final Fantasy game? That it'd be one of the most recognizable pieces of music ever in video games? Did he know that Prelude would go on to do much of the same? The things that we know now are certainly beneficial, but it also creates a significant puzzle during the writing process. Instead of being able to write one-off pieces of music, I now have to keep in mind that some of the music being written has to be able to move across titles in order to keep continuity throughout the series. I don't like talking about a potential future this far away, but I'd like to not cause issues should I continue to do this beyond the first Final Fantasy. Even the battle theme and victory fanfare at the very least contain elements that would persist for years to come. All of this has to be understood even before the process of writing actually begins. This isn't a project I'm taking lightly, but there are some things I feel should be made clear from the start. Number 1. I am not out to improve on Nobuo Uematsu's work. I feel like this shouldn't have to be said, but I will do so anyway. I'm using his work as a reference tool for learning. Not even in my wildest dreams do I expect to create anything remotely close to as good as what he can and did and does. I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with the soundtrack. This is just where I'm choosing to begin my learning journey. Number 2, I am not remixing any of Mr. Nobuo's work. This will be all of my own creation. That being said, I am very influenced by Mr. Nobuo's work, and this will likely be evident in some manner, especially when it's his material I'm breaking down to try to get an understanding of. Number 3, I will not promise sound design continuity throughout the soundtrack. I'll be using tools I'm not used to, and it's entirely possible that at the end, I have 20 plus tracks that sound very different from one another. It's a blessing I have so many ways to create sound, and a curse that I have tools that he only wished he had in 1987. My goal truly is to create a good soundtrack, and continuity is vital for that. But if I feel like I were to fail at some point, this would be it. Creating music that makes sense to me is priority number 1. Number 4, please take everything I say with mountains of salt. During the process of writing, I'll be breaking down the original tracks to gain an understanding of how Mr. Nobuo writes. Now, my understanding of music theory is all but non-existent. I can almost guarantee that I will use terms incorrectly, claim I have an understanding of something that I very much do not, and I ask that this be kept in mind. I'll do my best to not spread incorrect information, but please be cautious, especially if this somehow becomes educational for you. A very important part of this for me is what I'm able to learn, not what I'm able to teach, even if I can't properly explain what it is I'm learning. I ask that if such things do happen, please feel free to correct me in the comments. Number 5, lastly, I know virtually nothing about making videos, so please bear with me while I have to navigate this skill too. The script is being written before I begin the composition process, so there may be some differences in what I've said and what I'm about to say and what actually happens. I plan on tackling the songs as they appear in a normal playthrough of the game. I expect that the videos would start breaking down the original music from instrumentation to mood conveyed to whatever else I feel is significant to the piece. Following that would be my process in creating an original replacement piece of music. I do want to thank you very much for listening to me talk about this for such a long period of time. The script is like 1,500 words or so, and it feels like this video is going to be way too long with so little substance. If anything I've said, though, does sound interesting to you, I invite you to subscribe for the next video where I tackle a ridiculous, what a stupid start to this. I have to do the prelude. Like, how am I gonna make the prelude? Wow. Anyway, hopefully it'll be released in tandem with this video, so it's not just my ramblings that lead to nothing. But yeah, take care, and hopefully see you soon.